All right, we're at the Cleveland Botanic Garden. Super excited to be here. Thank you to folks who gave us permission to film here and at the Holden Arboretum yesterday. We filmed there. I don't know what order these videos will ultimately go up, but we're super excited to film at both. They're both connected together. The Holden Arboretum is just a little outside the city. The Cleveland Botanic Garden is smaller, much smaller footprint, but right in the city of Cleveland, basically, and surrounded by other city activities around us. And it's a beautiful oasis here. Just jumping into film, so we're going to discover it with you guys as we go. So that's kind of fun. But the first thing I saw here that just absolutely blew me away was this espaliered dogwood on the side of the building here. Look at this thing. This is unbelievable amount of work and time, energy that's gone into this. So when I walked up to it, I was like, well, it probably is Cornus cusa, but then when you look, I don't know if we'll be able to see one of these fruits, maybe, Steph, if we could find one to film easily without knocking anything off or doing any damage here. You see the fruit right there. That was a clue, okay, that it's not Cornus cusa. Cornus cusa has a little bit different of a fruit than that. And then when we look down at the trunk, down at the bottom, and you see that bark that's just kind of peeling like that, you see that it's actually Cornus moss, which we've shown off a Cornus moss at NC State University about 5 blocks from us. It's one of the most beautiful Cornus moss you'll ever see. It's been there long enough that it has the combination of the yellow flowers in the spring and the fruit in the fall and the fall color and the bark. You know, the bark becomes this, you know, kind of gnarly, flaking off bark that just is probably, to me, right at the top of the most beautiful parts of that plant. So there you go. This is the very first thing we saw when we walked out. The building has several other things on it. It's got some schizophragma growing on it, or I guess it's now hydrangioides or hydrangioides or something. Schizophragma. It'll always be schizophragma to us. And there's some Boston ivy, a few other things growing on the building as well. We've caught the Japanese anemones in full flower. They were in full flower at the Holden, and now they're in full flower here at the Cleveland Botanic Garden. And look at all the bee activity on this. If you know, it's amazing. This is a non-native that it can, you know, these anemones can be a bit of a bully in the garden, some more than others. If you see one running a little bit more than you want in your garden, you know, you can get control of it, you know, pretty quickly. Because it can run up into some places maybe you don't want it, but wow, when they come into flower, there's a late season pollinator opportunity, you know, native bees on a non-native plant, and they're loving it. Here's another example of that. There's a lot of abelia up here in the Cleveland area. You know, abelia is one of those leafy evergreen plants that will grow up into zone 6 easily. Fragrant flowers usually get started a little later than other things. I will say that in zone 6 here, they're probably thinning out. They're probably basically almost deciduous here, in all likelihood, depending on the winter, where they're more evergreen for us. The further south you go, the more evergreen they are. But regardless, again, another non-native plant here in the garden that is, you know, the bees are, you know, not an issue, right? I mean, they're loving it, and it's not, you know, not an invasive plant. And then you come down the line, and this is just true with all these gardens that we visit now. You know, here's clethra that bloomed out earlier in the season. Probably pretty late here though. We saw clethra blooming in the woods. We did some hiking around in the Cleveland area since we've been here, and have seen a few flowers still on a few. So they bloom much later up here than they do for us. But the seed's still on there. You know, and there'll be an opportunity for birds to come along if they want to as well. So again, we see this combination everywhere where non-invasive, non-natives being combined with more and more, you know, native plants and a more natural look to the garden overall. You know, there are some formal spaces. We're going to jump in and see a couple formal spaces here, but for the most part, this is, you know, where we're heading, it seems like, with every garden we visit. Found this cool plant that I've never covered before. This is Abelia mosinensis. I think it's been reclassified as abelia with a different species name. Fragrant abelia is the common name for this one. Beautiful, super interesting bark, and it colonizes just a bit down at the bottom. And you can see it's about 8 feet tall or so, maybe just over 2 meters, something like that. Pretty common for this plant. It can be limbed up like this. You know, you could strip all this off and see this bark down at the bottom. You know, it's very attractive. Or you could probably reset prune this thing to the ground if you wanted to and have it just grow back as a shrub, you know, more shrub-like instead of tree-formed like this one. You can go out there and thin some of those canes down at the bottom as well. You can definitely see the Caprifoliaceae in this, which is the honeysuckle family. You know, the leaves, how the leaves are aligned on this. One of those plants, and Steph said to some indigo, so you can just kind of walk up and see if something's in that honeysuckle family a lot of times. Just similar traits. Again, the fragrant abelia. So this thing came into full bloom, full white flower a few weeks or months now ago. And then the calyx is left in place that has that kind of reddish tint to it. It almost looks like it's still in flower, right? Like it has kind of green and reddish flowers. But this is just left over where the flowers were earlier in the season. Super, super fragrant plant. I imagine this one is a real standout in the garden for several weeks in peak summer. They have this corydalis growing out of this stone wall and these yellow flowers that just are, you know, amazing. It's actually in the poppy family. It kind of looks like a pea family member as you're walking by it, but it's in the poppy family. Actually, it's been another one of those plants that's been renamed. I think it's like Pseudofumaria now, if I'm pronouncing that, not probably butchering that. This is a perennial plant that's native to Switzerland in the Alps and in rocky spaces. So they plugged it in here just in the perfect place. Short-lived perennial, but man, is it super, super showy. Little addition to tuck into a little hole left in the wall here while they were constructing it. They left these little pockets on purpose so they could plant it later. So this was an unexpected find at the Cleveland Botanic Garden. It's a southern magnolia, Magnolia grandiflora. This is native to our back garden in Raleigh, but this is Bracken's Brown Beauty, which is reputedly more cold hardy, and they have it tucked up, you know, against a building here and kind of a protected space. You know, once it gets up in the canopy a bit more, I don't know if it'll get hurt or not during the winter. Here's where the cones have formed, where we'd had the big white fragrant flowers earlier in the season, and the cones form. The seeds form within these cones. Have a very distinctive smell to them. If you ever smelled the seed from one of these magnolias or one of these cones, once the seed starts getting produced. Me and my friends as kids, being boys in the 80s and 70s, these pop off very easily, and they were like projectiles that we threw at one another. The back on the leaf of Bracken's has a pretty good color. This one's not in as much sun as it would probably like, so it's a bit thin, but they've had to put it in kind of protected space. This is what we do to push the limits of plants, right? We put them in maybe slightly more protected spaces. So we sacrifice a little bit of something to make sure that it survives. But there's a southern magnolia at the Cleveland Botanic Garden. Steph's bringing us into the Japanese garden. It's a really very private spot in here. There's a wisteria growing up above her head over top of this structure that they built. There's a dawn redwood. We shot a dawn redwood over at Holden as well. You got the mondo grass carpet underneath it, which looks fantastic. And you get one of these old azaleas that have just kind of bonsaiing itself right there. It's just the perfect addition there for a Japanese garden. Anytime we do a video on shade ground covers, and I ask, you know, what's kind of your go-to when anybody up in the north or any place where it has more moderate summers like the Pacific Northwest are going to say Haconocloa for sure. This is a variegated Haconocloa. It's gotten a little bit of burn on it during the peak summer months here. I think that variegation probably plays a role, you know, in getting a little bit of burn on it over the course of the year. There's a little cotoneaster coming out of the back of it here that has berries on it. You know, I love when things get planted together like this and then they just figure it out. You know, these two plants are just figuring it out together. You see it around the back as well. The Conifers is super aggressive during the peak summer months, but the cotoneaster gets to keep its leaves all winter. So it has that little bit of an advantage that it can play on. Can't leave the Japanese garden without pointing out this beautiful Pinus parviflora here. This is a Japanese white pine. We're heading out to film at a place that we have filmed before that has a lot of conifers, and you guys can guess what that is down below. We're in Cleveland now, and we're heading west towards something later, toward the middle of October. Love these. It's a short needled pine, and you'll get this two different colors in the needles, and I hope that shows up, where you get that kind of white striping and the green together, and it has a kind of a blue green and more of a kind of a forest green, I guess we would call that combination together. It's super, it stands out. I don't know how long this one's been in the ground. A long time, I suspect. And a little bit of pruning I can see been done up on the top of it to try to keep this kind of narrowing shape as it goes up. It's had some longer limbs up there in the past. It probably didn't look quite as good to have it barrel shaped. So they've narrowed it in as it's gotten taller up there, and it looks great. This waterfall Japanese maple, I am speaking later this year at a Japanese maple event, and we're taking photos here and there of Japanese maples as we've been traveling some for that event, and talking about just combinations. What combines well with Japanese maples in the garden. But this variety, waterfall, just keeps showing up everywhere. We saw this at Longwood, where it was up on a rock wall and allowed to come over the side of the rock wall. Yesterday we saw a pair of them at Holden, where they had them on a rock wall next to a set of steps. So the set of steps were like the waterfall, I guess we would call this. We also saw this at a garden center up in, was that in Maine, or was that in maybe New Brunswick, where we saw that. We stopped at that garden center, and it was in full fall color. This thing gets such great fall color. And this one's in great shape going into fall here in Cleveland. So this thing's gonna be just a show off here in the garden. But what a great variety of Japanese maple. Steph's getting in close on some Rhodia japonica. Really great shade, dry shade, deer-proof ground cover. Think about it like as a hosta but it's evergreen. It will get the red berry on it. I don't know that we're really growing them for that, but this time of year, maybe a little later, you'll see them in there. Steph's kind of hunting around for them now, but I don't see any. It's a little cold up here for Rhodia, but this is kind of a sunken area, and so I think that they're getting away with it down here at the bottom. There's a woodland garden. Steph's going to take you down that a little bit. This is Acer japonicum vidifolium, and I'll explain vidifolium in just a second when Steph comes over here. But this is known out in the world as the full moon maple, upright Japanese maple. Definitely needs a little bit of part shade typically. So this one's under the canopy of a very large oak that keeps trying to attack me with acorns as I'm standing here. Actually, this one leaves out kind of with a reddish tone in the spring, and then it gets this really intense kind of purpley red foliage in the fall. There have been a lot of other full moon maples added, that have been introduced over the years, and we're going to head out to the West Coast and see a lot of them in some filming later in the next few weeks. But vidifolium, because of the grape-like leaves, is a good name for it. But again, most of the time people call these full moon maples out in the world, and that particular shape of that leaf you'll see show up in lots and lots of other varieties. It's layered down. This garden has beautiful layering. So this, I don't know, that tree is 12, 15 feet tall, and down below it there's a pine that I actually don't know what that pine is, the entryway here into the Japanese garden. But down below that there's an acerum canadense. This is the Canadian wild ginger. So Asarum is wild ginger. There's a lot of Asarum out in the world. And if you go to Plant Delights, or go to go to the garden there at Plant Delights, juniper level. If I can, things will come to my mind quick enough. There's a ton of Asarum in that garden. I mean, a lot of different species, a lot of interesting work that other folks have done with them, but makes just this perfect little ground cover basically along this stone path. And again, this is the Canadian wild ginger, and looks perfect. The rhodia back in the back, rocks stuck in here, the hosta, all of this together just is this beautifully layered garden here. I always say this, but coming to these gardens in the fall, and a lot of stuff in my travel happens to be in the fall a lot of times. We're busy with the channel, busy with the garden earlier in the year, and we feel like this time of year we can take a break. Normally it's rained a little more than it has, so I hate leaving it as kind of as dry as it's been, although there's been a little bit of rain in the last couple of days here. But this is our time to travel, and we get to go into these gardens, and you think, well, it's fall, there's just not going to be much going on, but then you find out how many things are still flowering in the fall, how many things still have berries, fruit, interesting bark, all these things that, the conifers are now the big show-offs. But then you look at things like this is a Fothergilla, great native plant that, blooms in the spring. I think I talked about it in the Holden video, but here it is starting to get some of this fall color. And this thing is a real show-off when it hits peak color. Better up here in Cleveland than it is for us down in the south. We'll have good years and bad years with the fall color on it. Here's an Asian plant. This is dappled willow, or Salix integra. This species is like native to China, Korea, Japan, but this is the variegated version of it. Hakuro nishiki is the name this one goes under. I grew tons of these at my nursery. They're beautiful show-off plants. Typically earlier in the season have a little more variegation than they do this time of year. Very short-lived shrubs for us down in Raleigh. I mean, I see these things planted and they look great for 3 or 4 years. Then you got to know at some point they don't look good anymore. Up here, I think they last longer than that. But really a big-time show-off shrub in the garden. And then, right behind that, you have the native Itea back here. Itea would have bloomed heavily in the spring, probably toward May here in Cleveland, maybe even into June, whereas it's a little earlier in the season. And then you get this reddish stem on it, and then the fall color will start on it here pretty soon, and it is. So you starting to get that red fall color in there. And then next to that, we have some clethra. We have I think we have a calicarpa there's a calicarpa back on the back side of it. It's probably not getting enough sun to have flowered or fruited, but there's clethra, another great southeastern native, or eastern part of the U.S. Native. So just right here in this one section, you've got fall color showing up in 2 different things, and variegation still here in the garden. And so, the garden to me it's not necessarily as floriferous as it is in the spring, obviously, but it has tons to offer. The entryway into the rose garden is framed by these yews, which they're putting Christmas lights on at this point. This is that time of year when a lot of these gardens go all in on the Christmas lights for that that season. I'm sure it's beautiful out here that time of year, but they've used yews as the formal edging around this, where a lot of folks would use boxwoods or whatever. I mean, you can use all kinds of things, but these yews are absolutely perfect for that. Pretty typical of most rose gardens now. They're less lined up roses, and they're put in some sort of way that allows for other things to be planted around them and under them, throughout the garden. There's sedum blooming in front of it, and some other sedums that would have bloomed earlier in the season. And there's bees all over the place in here. So there's lots of opportunity for pollinators in here. There's native plants that have been added in here, like heuchera and physocarpa right there. There's a peach that would have bloomed a little earlier in the season. Then, in front of that are some dwarf, kind of ground cover roses that have been bred to be much cleaner, much less, spraying and that, the kind of things you would have to done on rose gardens in the past. They just require a lot less than they used to. And then, back framing this garden in the back there is a conifer garden with all these weeping conifers in the background, and the Colorado blue spruce, the dwarf blue spruces back here. All of this looks, it's the coolest backdrop you could ever get to a formal garden, right? To have all of those interesting conifers in the background, and the blue spruce. The blue spruces have lights on them as well. I'm sure that's going to be beautiful at night for anybody visiting. But again, this kind of an evolution here in these formal spaces, to have more informal things in the formal spaces and have opportunities for pollinators even within the formal spaces. The topiary garden is framed by this weeping Norway spruce here, Pisces abies pendula. We see this plant used various ways all over the place. There's one, in fact, right here behind here that's just been staked up and allowed to, staked much taller to weep down. So you got the effect over here is a 15-foot tall weeping plant. And the effect right here is they put 4 pieces of rebar together to hold this in place, and then they've shaped this over the top in time. There were, looks like at least 4 to 5 plants originally planted here and then bent over into this shape. We'll see Katsuras used this way. What else do we see that's like this? Yeah, taxodium, weeping taxodium is a good choice for this. There's one that's could be done at the Ralston that's just perfect for, it's already the perfect shape where you can go up in it like that. At some point maybe they'll turn that one into a tunnel. But what a greeting to a garden, right? All right, this is one we can reference from our garden. This is Pinus sylvestris, Scots pine. These are like, you want something cold hardy, this thing is like cold hardy to zone 2 if I remember correctly, 2 or 3, really cold hardy. Does not like our space in Raleigh next to the sidewalk. The one we have is called green penguin. This is another dwarf Scots pine. I'm not sure of the name of it, but it's been turned into this, basic bonsai shape, creating this multi-ball topiary that they've pruned this one into over time. And man, it's a stunner. That is a beautiful, beautiful pine. Here's an Ilex crenata that's always interesting to me, called dwarf pagoda. This is one of those plants. If you can get this plant, I highly recommend this plant, but not a lot of growers are going to grow it. It's got to be the slowest growing Japanese holly out in the world. But it always has this contorted habit, perfect for Japanese gardens, perfect for rock gardens. You could shape that any way you want to shape it, but again, it just has no commercial value whatsoever because it takes 8 years to grow one this tall, and that's just not the kind of thing we're going to see. And but there's tons of Ilex crenatas or Japanese hollies out in the world. It's just that one is particularly slow. Another cool thing they have is this Picea glauca pendula grouping. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 of them here. This is the weeping white spruce, and look at how striking this is. I mean, it's unbelievable. Of course, it's thinning a bit. We're abnormally dry, and this is the time of year when these conifers will shed a few needles. So you don't want it to go crazy. You don't want it to be so dry that it drops half of them, but they're going to drop a few this time of year. They also try to put on a little bit of growth this time of year as well. The other thing, they're kind of creating this frame out of these yellow cedars back here, or Nootka cedar, I think is the other common name for these. But look at this, and one day this is going to come together here. They'll be able to frame this other side, the other entryway, like they did the other side. These are really, really beautiful. And look at this stuff. Come right here and show off. It's extremely soft to the touch. Weeping. Look at that. Beautiful. This is a really great garden near the city, you know, right here in the city. Really extremely detailed. I came across a couple more interesting plants here. This gladiola is amazing. Peacock orchid, some people call this one. See that color, amazing. And then in blooming right here before you know, almost October. We're about to change the clock over to October. This staghorn sumac, not sure what cultivar this is. There are a couple of these yellow cultivar sumacs. I don't think this one is tagged, but what a showy plant. I mean, you can throw out here, and they've got it in several different places, and it makes everything else show up so well to put one of these chartreuse, you know us and chartreuse plants, right? And then the red stems, you know, in the middle of that, and out here in the full sun. And you know, it's definitely a, you know, tough neighborhood over here. Metal art here is beautiful. The kind of a backdrop to a larger city park, you know, open space city park that's back here behind us, and incredibly beautiful place. So we feel super fortunate that we were able to film over at the Holden and here at the Cleveland Botanic Garden. Really, you know, thank you to everyone who you know, took our email and took us seriously and allowed us to come in here and film, because we love being able to film in these gardens, but we always ask permission. I mean, a lot of these, you know, you know, you can take certainly private photos and that kind of thing, but if you're coming in to do some sort of commercial filming, it's best to make sure that you're checking with folks and following all of their rules, and then being, you know, we try to get here as first thing in the morning, you know, first thing we can, and stay out of people's way as much as possible, who are also trying to enjoy the garden and not listening to me run my mouth on camera. But thank you guys so much for following along with the channel. Thank you for following along with our travels. We've got some really great upcoming content, I do believe, and thanks for following along with it.